Salutations, industrialists! I'm Mark, a producer working on Gilded Destiny. In today's Dev Diary, we're going to update you on the progress we've been making with leaders, including our art style, animations, modding, and the importance of leaders in the game. You may remember our last Dev Diary on leaders from last year, where we discussed the leader UI, leader traits, positions and skills, and the general mechanics of the leader system. I'll give a brief recap here, but be sure to check out that Dev Diary for more information. Without further ado, let's dive in. As we've mentioned in previous updates, we're working closely with an outsourcing studio to bring our leaders to life visually. This collaboration allows us to scale the production of portraits while still maintaining a high level of artistic quality and historical authenticity. Somewhat similar to the previous leader portraits, we've opted for a painterly style that allows us to represent a wide range of historical personas with a fitting degree of detail and personality. Given the number of countries and the overall time span of the game, there will be some historical figures who will be in the game as leaders, but who won't necessarily have unique portraits. There's a limit to the number of historical figures we're able to portray, especially since we have leader positions for the head of state, which is usually a monarch, the head of government, 4 members of the cabinet, 3 research posts, and any number of generals and admirals. Even if we just had one position to account for, France alone had around 50 presidents of the council during the period our game covers. We've therefore had to be somewhat selective in terms of which leaders get unique portraits and which get generic portraits that are simply representative of the social class and nationality of that leader. This means that we do still have plenty of leaders who don't have unique portraits, but who do still have appropriate traits and stats. When it comes to leaders' clothing, we've tried to preserve some degree of personal and cultural variation within a manageable scope. For military uniforms, while most countries during the 19th century imitated the French style, there are some notable exceptions that we've made sure to include. Red coats for British generals, white for Austrians, and so on. Likewise, although statesmen and researchers tend to wear similar clothing, certain countries needed something more unique for certain positions, such as the yellow dragon robes of the Qing emperors. Our general approach to leader animations is to create the impression of a living portrait, something subtle and dignified that won't be too distracting or out of place. A little goes a long way here. After all, in real life, people don't tend to move around all that much. So rather than having them nodding like bobbleheads or gulping for air like sprinters, we've gone for a more restrained style of animation that mimics the small movements that people make when they are, say, sitting for a portrait. Enough to show that they're alive, but without constantly trying to prove it. We'd like to think that if animated portraits existed in the 19th century, this is how they would have looked. That said, let's take a look at how animations work for Queen Victoria. Once a portrait is finalized and approved, after going through checks for historical accuracy and artistic polish, we move on to the animation phase. The portrait is broken down into its core components: head, clothing, body, and background. Each piece is exported as a high-quality PNG file and prepared for animation using Spine, a dedicated tool for rigging and motion. In Spine, we create meshes for each component and set up a skeletal rig, which allows us to animate small, natural movements like breathing or the faint shifting of posture. These animations are then carefully tuned to match the mood and style we're aiming for. After an animation is complete, everything is packaged for use in Unity. At present, we have designed 8 animation clips that are applied across all leader portraits. After one animation completes, a new one is randomly selected from the pool, creating an ongoing loop of non-repetitive motion. The Spine Unity plugin handles blending between animations automatically, using its mixing system to ensure smooth and natural transitions. This setup allows us to give every portrait a sense of quiet presence without requiring custom animation work for each individual leader. Once leader portraits and animations are finalized, the next step is integrating them into the current development build via our game editor. We start out by inputting basic information like the leader's name, nationality, country, age, gender, traits, stats, and so on. After this, we can assign the leader their portrait head and clothing. In this case, we're adding Wilhelm I of Prussia into the game, assigning him a body and uniform and linking these to his leader profile. This is just an explanation of how we've set up the animation system for our portraits. As we'll see later, when it comes to adding new leaders into the game, these animations are applied automatically. You'll easily be able to add your own head and outfits into the game. So, how do we pick which leaders to represent? For the unique portraits, we're focused on the real heavy hitters of the 19th century. The men and women whose names and sometimes faces are instantly recognizable, and whose actions defined an era or changed the course of history. Monarchs and presidents tend to get a bit more of the limelight just because they tend to be better known, whether that's a consequence of how we're taught history or simply the result of having their faces plastered all over the currency. However, we've also sometimes saved a bit of space for figures who could have changed the course of history in a major way, in order to make some alt history avenues a bit more attractive. For instance, you can certainly expect to see Ernest Augustus making an appearance. When it comes to the game itself, historical leaders will often be added to the country's leader pool as and when they started to make their mark in world history. In some cases, whether those leaders appear will obviously be dependent on certain conditions. For instance, since leaders share the same cultural, religious, and political dimensions as pops, barring a certain culture or religion from taking office may prevent them from appearing. A few leaders may even have a special event chain that affects whether you get them or not, especially when it comes to monarchs and the various comings and goings of the European aristocracy. Aside from monarchs, of course, it'll usually be up to you to assign leaders to positions for which you think they'll be suited. Most leaders' stats will give some indication of what they'll be best at, although typically they'll start with fairly modest stats that will improve the longer they occupy a position. They'll also have individual traits, and can potentially get new traits, both good and bad, as they gain experience. As you'd expect, your leaders will also have a lifespan that eventually runs out, so they will need to be replaced over the course of the game. Now, I'd like to spotlight how you can upload your own leader portraits in the game. While we are still refining the process within the editor for modders, I wanted to show what we can do now with the editor alone. Keep in mind, of course, that our programmers currently use another internal process for implementing leaders and portraits into the game. To demonstrate this, I'd like to introduce you to my supervisor and home office manager. As he has a large amount of input on the production of Gilded Destiny, we'll be using his image as an example to show you how we can add portraits into the game or swap portraits for current leaders. Let's take a look at the current process for adding new portraits into the game using the editor. First, we need to import the new PNG file into the game. It's worth noting that you can upload any PNG file to the editor for use as a leader portrait, but the closer it is to the custom leader heads our artists have created, the better it will render in the game. As this is just an example, of course, our new king's portrait will not line up perfectly. Once we've added that into game resources, we can head over to the database to add this file as a new leader head, which can then be used by any one of the leaders in the game. You can see from this spreadsheet that there are a few boxes that you can select to indicate the age, body type, and other characteristics that the new leader portrait has. After this, you can head over to the Leaders section of the editor, where historical leaders are listed. You could create your own leader as well, but for this example, we'll focus on swapping the head out of an existing one. At the start of our game, the King of the United Kingdom is King George of Hanover, so we know that the portrait of King George will appear in 1822 as the head of state of the United Kingdom. From this screen, we can choose to edit his leader profile, and from here, we can change the portrait head that is associated with King George of Hanover. We will then choose the new body type for our new leader, and finally, we can choose the clothing we wish him to wear, in this case, a distinguished military uniform. From here, we'll export this from the editor and copy into the game files. This is the process that we are still working on streamlining for our modders, but essentially, we plan for the changes exported from the editor to be easily input into the game files. Okay, now that we've exported and input our changes into the game, you can see that the United Kingdom has a new, very regal leader, ready to steer his country to greatness, food, and comfy boxes. If you like the idea of an official Gilded Cats of Destiny mod, let us know. So that's probably a good place to end for today, but before we close out this Dev Diary, I'd like to ask our new king of the United Kingdom if he has any final words. Well, there you have it. We hope you've enjoyed this Dev Diary, and as always, if you have any questions or comments, let us know below. You can also, if you listen closely, hear our king scratching in the background. Lastly, remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel, and if you have not done so already, add Gilded Destiny to your Steam wishlist. Until our paths converge once more, we bid thee farewell. May your destiny be a gilded one.